topic is, what are we afraid of? The politics of fear in America. And I'm like, I can work with that. Seems rational, seems logical. It is an honor to talk about that. Of course, when you ask the question, what are we afraid of? By definition, the first question you have to ask before you can answer that one is, who is we? And on the one hand, we're all afraid of something, right? We all are. But I'm fairly confident I know who the we in this question is. And I certainly know who I'm gonna make it about, whether that was y'all's intention or not. We're gonna talk about what it is that white Americans in particular are afraid of, because we seem to be afraid of a lot. Crime is not up, crime is down, not just by a little bit, but by a lot. In fact, violent crime is down by 2/3 since the early 1990s. Across the board, in white neighborhoods, in black neighborhoods, Milwaukee, safer today than in 1991. Chicago, safer today than in 1991. Washington, D.C., safer today than in 1965. New York City, safer today than in 1972. In fact, the black male homicide rate is lower today than it was in 1950. And yet we have fools running governments and media talking heads who want you to believe, because it feeds their political power and feeds your fear, which feeds their power, that things have gone off the rails, that the country's getting more dangerous, that black people are killing one another in record numbers, or maybe even killing white people in record numbers, neither of which are true.
What's up, YouTube family? Welcome back to my space. This is Evans Raiola. Guys, thank you so much for tuning to watch this episode. I do not take your support for granted. So guys, on today's video, we want to talk about the politics of fear in America, and specifically the white fear in America. And to speak to us today is Tim Wise. Tim Wise is a prominent anti-racist writer and educator. He has spoken extensively about the politics of fear in America and white fear in America, particularly in the context of race, privilege, and systemic inequality. So guys, I want you to listen to this video of Tim Wise as he explains why he believes that there is a lot of white fear in America, and there is a lot of this politics of fear being sold in America. Once the video is done, we will get back and do a critical analysis about the same. Let's watch this together, family.
The topic is, what are we afraid of? The politics of fear in America. And I'm like, I can work with that. Seems rational, seems logical. It is an honor to talk about that. Of course, when you ask the question, what are we afraid of? By definition, the first question you have to ask before you can answer that one is, who is we? And on the one hand, we're all afraid of something, right? We all are. But I'm fairly confident I know who the we in this question is. And I certainly know who I'm gonna make it about, whether that was y'all's intention or not. We're gonna talk about what it is that white Americans in particular are afraid of, because we seem to be afraid of a lot nowadays. And like I said, it's okay. It's all right to be afraid. We're all afraid of something. I'm afraid of calculus because I never learned how to do it, so it's very intimidating. This is a thing, right? And so a few years ago, I got what is really not a singular, but a rather ubiquitous type of email from a young man, well-intended, I'm sure, although it was all in capital letters in red font, so I knew that this young man was angry. That is the universal signal that I don't like you when I send you an email in all capital letters in red font, because God forbid you sent it to me in black font and took the cap lock off, I would not know by dint of your words that you hated me. And so this young man writes to me, big red letters, I can't find a job because all the jobs are going to blacks and Mexicans. I thought, really? All the jobs are going to blacks and Mexicans? That I find fascinating, because the Labor Department data that I had literally seen the day before the email came in told me that black and brown folks were roughly twice as likely as white folks to be unemployed, even when they had the same level of education. That is to say, African Americans with college degrees almost twice as likely as whites with college degrees to be out of work, even when they had the same major. Latinx folks with college degrees 50 to 60% more likely to be out of work than their white counterparts, even when they had the same major. Indigenous folks, 2/3 more likely to be out of work than white folks, even when they had the same degree, same major. Asian American and Pacific Islanders, 25% more likely than whites to be out of work, even with the same degree and the same major. So I'm not totally sure which people of color were taking this dude's job or where these jobs were. Maybe they were in Second Life. Maybe these jobs were digging ditches on Minecraft. But wherever they were apparently not in the real labor market. And yet, he was quite convinced of it, and he was afraid of it, because someone had convinced him that someone had taken his job. Just as a side note, and if you take nothing else away from this speech, that would be a shame, but if you take nothing else away from the speech, please write this down. When people say, "You took my job," my question for you is this: did you have the job yet? Because if you didn't have it, it was not yours, right? Like, maybe I would be more sympathetic if the white guy got the call on Monday from the HR manager and they said, "Bill, congratulations, you've been hired." And then Wednesday, the same HR manager called back and said, "No, I'm just kidding. I'm giving the job to Jose, but thanks for playing." Like, that would be unfair. But that is not what is happening. But we have people like this young man, right, who are convinced that his pain, his unemployment, which is quite real, I guess. I mean, he could be lying. But I'll take him at his word, because there are millions of white people just like himself, unable to find work, still haven't really recovered from the recession. The pain is real, just like the pain in my chest was real. And my wife, God love her, 20 years in, knows not to be so cruel as to question my pain. She did not look at me and say, "Tim, you have lost your mind. It is all in your head. You are not in pain." She acknowledged it. She just wanted me to get a proper diagnosis, and not the one that I could find on some chat board, right? But this young man has been told that his pain is the result of those people, and so that's why he is afraid. But it's not the only fear, right? It's not the only fear that people have. There are other fears that politicians, so-called leaders, will stoke for the sake of political gain. We have a president who, on the campaign trail, for instance, gave a speech in which he said to black people, though he said it in front of white people, which is fascinating, right? Went to Milwaukee, but not really Milwaukee. He went to a white suburb of Milwaukee and gave a talk, supposedly to black people, in a room full of white people about black people. And what he said is, "You all can't even leave your house without getting shot." Again, I don't know who the "you all" is. I doubt it is the white folks of Pewaukee outside of the city, right? But he says, this is the problem. We're living in American carnage. You people can't even walk out your door without getting shot, stoking fear of what? Crime. But to whom was he speaking? Right? Was he speaking out of real conviction and concern for black safety? Well, he's not speaking to black people, so I sort of doubt it. He's speaking in a room full of white people. The purpose of that speech is not to show sympathy or solidarity with black people, but to remind white people of just how dangerous black people are. That's why he did it. And it wasn't even true. It was about stoking fake fear, because contrary to the president's rhetoric and contrary to the beliefs of millions of people, crime is not up, crime is down, not just by a little bit, but by a lot. In fact, violent crime is down by 2/3 since the early 1990s. Across the board, in white neighborhoods, in black neighborhoods. Milwaukee, safer today than in 1991. Chicago, safer today than in 1991. Washington, D.C., safer today than in 1965. New York City, safer today than in 1972. In fact, the black male homicide rate is lower today than it was in 1950. And yet we have fools running governments and media talking heads who want you to believe, because it feeds their political power and feeds your fear, which feeds their power, that things have gone off the rails, that the country's getting more dangerous, that black people are killing one another in record numbers, or maybe even killing white people in record numbers, neither of which are true. But why do they lie? See, the data's there. It's very clear. It's Department of Justice, it's FBI, it's the Bureau of Justice Statistics. And this is not opinion, by the way. This is not like, there's no rebuttal to what I'm saying. So don't even try Googling it. Like, there's no rebuttal to what I'm saying. It's factual, and yet we have people who are convinced that America's more dangerous than ever. But there is less crime today than when many of your parents were in college. They may not believe that. Same thing with K-12 schools, right? We act like schools have become cesspools of violence because we have politicians and we have media talking heads who make it seem that way. Oh my goodness, the young people are out of control. Of course, every generation has said that about young people, right? You can actually go back to the 1930s and you can find statements made by media talking heads even then, and by commentators and by politicians and by parents of children, that the kids in high school were ruffians and thugs and out of control, horrible people, the worst generation ever. Of course, now we remember these young people as the so-called greatest generation who won World War II. But at the time, we looked at them as thugs and ruffians and ne'er-do-wells because every generation, that's the same shtick that we push and that we pump even when it's not true. Schools are safer today than they were 30 years ago and 40 years ago. Acts of violent crime, acts of property crime down across the board in urban schools, in suburban schools, in small town schools, in rural schools. That's just a fact. But we have people who profit off fear, and particularly the fear of what? Racial others, economic others, right? National others, religious others. Or we're told what? That there are people coming over the border to kill us, to harm us, to reap chaos in our country, ignoring, of course, the fact that violent and property crime rates are lower among undocumented people than they are among citizens of the United States, ignoring the fact that undocumented border crossings are actually down by 2/3 since the year 2000, which is to say there is no national emergency today if the border crossings are down and if crime is down. Oh, and by the way, neighborhoods and communities with larger percentages of undocumented people actually have lower crime rates than neighborhoods and communities with less of a population of undocumented people. If all of that is true, and it is, then the whole idea of a national emergency is about stoking fear. It's not about actually addressing problems. 40% of all the people in this country who are quote unquote undocumented or quote unquote illegal didn't even cross a border illegally. They came legally on a work visa or an education visa, overstayed that visa. So building a wall isn't going to stop them, right? Shutting down the border isn't going to stop them, but a disproportionate number of those folks are from places like Canada, so. Where we also don't construct a wall. Isn't that fascinating? We're apparently only worried, only afraid, only in fear about people at this border, never this border, only this border, never this border. Apparently, we are not concerned about crafty Canadians sneaking into the United States to take advantage of our superior healthcare system. Which would be weird if they were to do that. That's why Senator Rand Paul, right, when he had to have hernia surgery, he didn't go to Kentucky, where he's from, didn't go to Lexington, right? Went to Canada. But we're number one, just remember. I got about 40 more minutes of this, so y'all hang tight. So we're being told to be afraid of these things, even when these things are not really the source of the harm, the pain. The pain is real. And we ought not minimize that, and we ought to try to really address it. But if you're going to try to address pain without properly diagnosing its source, you're never really going to solve the problem, right? I mean, this is just sort of common sense. So it isn't compassionate to speak to people's pain in a way that isn't accurate. That's not compassion, right? You have to speak to it in a way that is accurate, and you have to insist on a proper diagnosis. But what makes it so easy for people to fall into these traps? Because I think most people are good people. Now, I could be wrong. I could be. But at the age of 50 and with a 17 and a 15-year-old daughter, I have a vested interest in believing that people are generally good, right? And if you know otherwise, please don't tell me. I'd rather stay in this bubble of naivete and faux innocence for a minute. So I like to believe that people are basically good, but of course good people, right, can get sucked into bad systems of operation, bad institutions and structures, and bad systems of thought, right, that sort of take our otherwise goodness and our, good, positive, compassionate, caring tendencies and distort them or twist them or, shift them and twist them in some way that steers us away from our better selves. So, Even though I think people are good, we can fall into these patterns of thought and behavior. And I would contend that there are two things really that make it possible, not just possible, but actually sort of predictable, that millions of Americans will fall into these patterns of fear and misdiagnosis of pain, right, in such a way that it's not at all surprising. Now, I'm not saying this to let people off the hook when they fall into those patterns. I think we have to be held accountable for the things we do. But at the same time, I think that if you fall into patterns, if you fall into traps that were set for you, right? Traps that were set for you by the culture, it's not enough to just judge you for that, right? I have to judge the culture for that, right? It's like when you go shopping, right? When you go to the grocery, what do they tell you to do? Never go to the grocery what? Right, see, everybody knows, and yet what do we all do? We go to the grocery when we are hungry because we are hungry, and that's where there's food, right? So we go to the grocery and we're hungry, and what do you know? There's always candy at the checkout aisle. Now, does anyone in this room think that that is a coincidence? Does anyone in this room think, for instance, that the purchasing manager at the grocery store just keeps ordering too much candy and can't figure out, my God, I keep doing this. I keep ordering more candy than the actual candy aisle will hold. What in the world shall we do with the surplus? Oh, I don't know, Jim. Let's just put it at the checkout. We got nowhere else to put it. It's not a coincidence. It's because it's an understood trap, right? Because the people that make money selling you stuff know that if they put candy at the checkout and the National Enquirer and the People magazine and the beef jerky or whatever else it is that you don't really need, don't really want, but always buy, that you will purchase it. Because that's impulse purchasing. It's a trap, and we all fall for it, at least sometimes. Not all the time. Right? Sometimes we're real smart and we eat before we go and we're like, I'm not buying the candy today. Right? But next time you're going to buy the candy. Right? And they know it. So can I judge you for it? Yeah, I can judge myself for it. But the real question is the culture that's setting the trap of consumerism, of materialism, of impulse purchasing, or in the case of racial bias, gender bias, class bias, all these other types of biases and prejudices, the traps of those, right, which are being set by the culture. So I think there are two forces that make it really easy and even predictable for people to fall into these traps. The first is an absolutely pathetic historical memory. We are the most ahistorical people on earth, right? And this is funny for a people that so love history, but only a certain version of it. Because white folks do love the past, y'all. Like, you do know that, right? Like, we like history. We like the past. Like, the past, we like it. We just like the past that makes us feel good, right? The past that makes us feel special. The past that allows us to have a little cute little hat with the slogan, Make America Great Again. Because you remember it was great. You remember when America was great, right? Don't know for whom, but when it was awesome. Until it went off the rails with that black guy who became president. Everything was cool right up until that, apparently, right? So we love the past when it makes us feel good. Now, we don't necessarily like it when people of color bring up the past, though. Right? I was at University of Mississippi the other night, and the day before I got there was a big neo-Confederate rally, because Mississippi, and these good old boys are out there with their gray uniforms on, because their great-great-great-granddaddy Beauregard left it to them. And they're out there rallying with the Confederate flag and unironically telling black people to get over slavery. Now, see, here's the problem. When you tell black folks to get past the past and you're marching around waving a flag of a government that lost and lost badly 150 years ago, wearing gray uniforms of a defeated army, you do not obviously understand the definition of irony, because you are a walking, talking piece of evidence of the thing. We don't like that past. We just like the past that venerates great-great-great-grandpappy Beauregard, not the one that brings him up a little short. So we have a horrible historical memory. We pick and choose, and we all do it. We do it in our own lives. I mean, let's just all admit it, right? We pick and choose the history of our own families that we want to recall. We want to hold up the good. We don't want to take the bad. We don't want to look at it too long. I get it. Like, it's understandable. It's a natural human instinct. The problem is when entire cultures do that, it makes it impossible to move forward and create justice, because you're not accurately recollecting how you got into the period of injustice. You're not actually reflecting and accurately understanding how you got from point A to B. And if you don't know how you got here, you're not going to figure out how to get over there to point C, right? Or D or E or F or whatever it is. So we have a horrible historical memory. That's why people can wear that hat and the MAGA gear unironically, because they actually are able to believe, because of their identity, that America was once great. But for whom was it great? I mean, it ought not be radical at all to suggest that America was never great for black people. That ought not be a radical statement. It is obvious, it is true, it is irrefutable, there is no rebuttal to it. America was never great for peoples of color. America was never great for women as women. Like until 1971 or 2, when the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed, women, including white women, couldn't even get their own lines of credit from banks unless their daddy or their husband took out the credit line for them. That's within my lifetime and the lifetimes of many people in this room. So when was America great for women as women? Please pray tell. When was it great for LGBTQ folk? When was it great for religious minorities? When was it great for the poor of any race? You think America was great for those poor white kids that worked in coal mines in 1911 and 12 at the age of 14? It wasn't great for them either. The only people for whom America was ever great were the ones who ran it. Rich, white, straight, at least claiming to be straight men. Right? It wasn't even great for all of them, right? But great enough that now they want to make it great again, like that. That's historical memory being blinkered and ridiculous and absurd. Right? But you don't have to know any better. You don't have to know that. And when you even say that, people go, that's un-American. You're un-American for saying that. No, I'm just accurate. I'm just telling the truth. I'm just not really into lying because that's what we do as a country. We tell lies about history because it makes us feel better. Like, what did George Washington do when he was a kid? Y'all remember, right? What'd he do? Chop down a cherry tree, and then what'd he do? Told his daddy because he couldn't tell a lie. Did anybody still believe that story? That did not happen, y'all. First of all, even if it did happen, how would anybody know that happened? Like when George Washington was 8, nobody knew he was going to be that George Washington. So nobody was paying attention to his 8-year-old self, thinking, oh, now that kid told his daddy about the cherry tree. We better write that down just in case he becomes president one day and we need to hold him up as a particularly honest individual. It was just a lie that we told because we wanted George Washington to be this superhero. And people might say, well, that's sort of, you're nitpicking, and what's the point of that? The point is, why did we tell the lie? See, why don't we just tell the truth about our history? Well, because if we tell the truth, then it complicates our narrative about the present, and it complicates what our obligations are in the present to try to create justice and to undo some of the damage, perhaps, of that past. And it means that we can't continue to be afraid of the stuff that some folks want us to be afraid of, because now we're seeing things more clearly. So we just settle for the inaccurate, absurd, blinkered historical memory. It's one of the reasons that there's so much pushback against the movement for Black lives that has emerged over the last several years in the wake of disproportionate police violence and brutality against Black bodies, right? Because when Black folks stand up and insist that Black lives matter, if you have an accurate historical memory, that will not shock you at all. It will not seem troublesome. It will not seem weird, right? But if you don't have an accurate understanding of history, then that will seem odd to you, and you'll say things like, well, but what about my life? What about white lives? White lives matter. Don't white lives matter? All lives matter. I know, precious. Oh, I know. I already told y'all, I got a 17-year-old daughter, 15-year-old white daughter. They are white. They're both white. That's what happens when white people make babies. You get white children. I got 2 of them. And I know their lives matter. I know their lives. You have to tell me that their lives matter. You don't need to let me know that. Here's the thing, though. See, the problem is everybody knows their lives matter. The cops all know it. The employers all know it. The teachers all know it. The loan officer at the bank, when they go get a mortgage one day, they're all going to know it. Nobody questions it. And see, that's the point. You don't have to specify what gets taken for granted. So you don't have to say white lives matter. You don't have to say all lives matter. You have to specify that which gets left out. And if you understand history, you know that specifically Black life has been devalued. That's why we must now claim it. That's why we have Black History Month, not White History Month, because we got a bunch of them. They just go by these tricky names we gave them, like May and June and July and August. All these names that we gave them just so folks wouldn't figure out that's what we were really doing, was white history. Now we're in Women's History Month. You don't need a Men's History Month, y'all. You got 11 of them. Right? You don't have to specify that which gets left out. And if you understand history, that won't shock you. Plus, you'd also understand that America has a long history of saying all and not meaning it. That's why All Lives Matter is not a comeback. It's not a rebuttal. It's absurdity. Right? We have a long history of saying all and leaving out certain people. Thomas Jefferson, right, said what? All men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But when he wrote those pretty words, he owned about 237 human beings, as I recall, so I'm figuring he didn't believe his own rhetoric. But it was pretty rhetoric. He just didn't really mean it, right? And then when the Pledge of Allegiance got written in the 1880s, it was redone in the 20s, it was redone again in the 1950s, but every iteration has ended with the same words. What are those words? With liberty and justice for all. There's that word again, all, but they didn't mean it. They didn't mean it in the 1880s. They didn't mean it in the 1920s, and they certainly didn't mean it in the 50s. So until all actually includes all, white folks are just going to have to back off and let black folks say black, and we need to say it with them. You understand? That's the reality of the situation. You have to specify that which has been left out. But again, if you don't have a clear understanding of the history of law enforcement in black communities, all of that will seem radical to you. Whereas if you do have that understanding, it won't seem radical at all. It'll just seem banal and obvious, right? Because at least, here's the thing, black folks know some of this history because they've lived it. So black folks know that policing traces directly to what? Slave patrols. That's the first iteration of law enforcement in this country that they experienced.
Family, before I give out my commentary, if there is one thing that I love about Tim Wise, has always been him being an anti-racist, you know, trying to just bridge the gap between the white folk and the black folk. He tries to explain to the white folk anytime how what they've been doing, the white privileges they have, you know, how it's not going okay, you know, with the black folk. He's always advocated for the black people. He says that the black folks have had enough, and he speaks on behalf of the black folk, you know, trying to explain to the white counterparts what they've been doing over time. You know, trying to explain to them why they should treat black people with utmost respect. And for that, I have always respected Tim Wise for his good works. So guys, in today's video, he spoke about white fear in America and how they've been selling the politics of fear. And guys, I went further to do more research in regards to the same. And here is what I found out. I want us to go deeper into Tim Wise's perspective on white fear in America and the politics of fear, breaking it down thematically and with analysis and historical context. So the first thing I want us to discuss about is fear as a racialized political weapon. You know, Tim Wise consistently urges that fear isn't just a political tool, it's racialized mechanism of control. You know, they want to control people with fear. It's not just a political weapon, it's racialized. You know, they want to control people with fear. White Americans are conditioned to fear the loss of control. You know, for the longest time, if a white kid was born in the 90s or in the 80s, they already found the white populations having control with power in politics in America. So they seldom fear, you know, of losing that control. They seldom fear of identity and perceived superiority. You know, they now fear losing the superiority. They fear about the loss of control, and this drives them. This fear is manipulated by political leaders to redirect legitimate economic and social frustrations away from those in power and towards racial scapegoats. And number two, we'd look at it from the psychological wedge of whiteness. Coined with W.E.B. Du Bois and echoed by Wise, the idea is that white Americans, especially poor and the working class, have been given a false sense of superiority over people of color. even while being economically exploited themselves. White argument is that the white fear isn't rooted in oppression. It's rooted in the fear of losing inherited advantages. You know, you're afraid of losing the white privileges you've gotten historically. You do not want to lose these historical advantages that you're getting over the colored people. As racial equality increases, many white people perceive that there is special status is being eroded. You know, when equality is being pushed right now in America, the white folks feel like their special status, their status of privilege is being eroded, and that's the biggest fear of the white man. White fear isn't rooted in oppression. It's rooted in the fear of losing inherited advantages. You know, as racial equality increases, many white people perceive that their special status is being eroded. This leads to support for policies that maintain hierarchy, even at their own economic expense, e.g. opposing universal healthcare if it's seen to help immigrants or black communities more. They do not want to lose their status. Even they do not care if they do not get the universal healthcare. You know, what they want to ensure that they're in a point of privilege, that there is no any point that a white man and a colored man, you know, will be in the same status. That is the biggest white fear that has been perpetuated to them. You know, they always think that having control is everything, you know, and then we can look at it from the demographic shifts. Tim Wise warns that many white Americans don't just fear being outnumbered, they fear being treated the way black and brown people have been treated in the US. Biggest white fear. They do not want at any given point in time, they are treated the same way as black folks, black and brown people are treated in America. Very big fear about that. This fear reveals a deep subconscious awareness of historical injustice. If whiteness loses its centrality, there is a belief that justice will follow, even though activists likewise advocate not for revenge but for fairness. Then there is color blindness as a form of denial. Wise criticizes liberal colorblind ideologies as a soft version of white fear, saying I don't see color can seem progressive, but Wise argues it's a refusal to see inequality. People live with a lot of fear. The white man lives with a lot of fear and pretends. He emphasizes that without confronting whiteness and structural racism head-on, white Americans remain complicit in the systems that harm others, even if unintentionally. Then we have the white fear drives policy and elections. Tim Wise notes that voter suppression, gerrymandering and mass incarcerations are modern tools of white fear. Politicians stroke fear around urban crime, illegal immigration or woke culture to justify oppressive measures that disappropriately affect people of color. The rise of Trump was not an anomaly but a manifestation of long brewing white grievance, tapping into a nostalgic fear of time when whiteness guaranteed dominance. Family, let me know in the comment section down below what you think about white fear in America and how they've been driving white people to want to ensure that they remain, you know, in the status of white privilege. You know, comment down below, let me know what you think about the video and what you've learned from this conversation by Tim Wise. Kindly like this video so that it can be recommended to other YouTube users, and I'll be very, very grateful. Last but not least, kindly consider subscribing to the channel. We endeavor to talk about black stories, black history, black empowerment, because I know that if we give the white man an opportunity to tell our stories, they always use it to manipulate us. Thank you guys, and see you all in our next video. Goodbye for now.